English translation. 491st contact, Monday, 22nd March, 2010, 15:12 hours.
Welcome and greetings, Ptah, dear friend. You are here 3 minutes early because when you called me, you said you would be here at 15:15 HRs. If I had known you were coming earlier, I would have drunk my coffee faster and come to the office earlier.
Edward, my friend, I just came in when you entered Eva's study. And as I noticed you were on your way here.
Understood, it is not important. But I think you are coming here today to report what you have found in relation to what we discussed at the meeting on Saturday.
That is correct. We discussed it at length. Our judgment is that all things were handled in a correct manner and that there were not any actual attacks. The 2 short attempts to let attacks arise, you have sovereignly stopped by your intervention. And indeed, it is astonishing how factually all the statements were made and not what you call gibberish came about. Obviously, your introductory words, that everything should be talked about in a reasonable and correct way, have taken the whole thing into account. But it may also be that our earlier conversations about gibberish have also borne fruit. And if we continue within this framework in the future, then a valuable step has been taken, which will be followed by others and through which many more progressive things can be gained. However, it must always be ensured that all those old values are retained which have proven to be useful and which are also compatible with progress and innovation. It would be fundamentally wrong simply to dismantle or disregard the tried and tested, because the only way to be correct is to combine the tried and tested with compatible new and progressive elements, respectively, so that truly valuable new elements can be created.
Good words, dear friend. But I think that you should perhaps say an epilogue to what you already said on the 1st of March, just in relation to the merchandise and animations.
That was also in my mind because I wanted to take up the whole thing again.
Then do not let me ask you, Ptah.
The distribution of merchandise, like T-shirts, cups, etc., as it is stated in your contract with Michael Horn and Jack Gerlach, is absolutely right, as well as the fact that such contracts are your personal matter. This, as the materials to be used for this purpose, such as pictures, symbols, words, and the emblem, etc., are your personal material, which will only become the property of the Figu Association when you leave the world, and therefore only then will the association have the right to decide. You have also recorded the facts and the related matters in your will. And as far as the right is concerned, that outside the Figu Association, commercial goods may be produced and distributed, even if they are labeled and printed with pictures of your materials. This is legally determined. The production and distribution costs, etc., related to the merchandise or animated films are to be borne exclusively by the respective operators. Therefore, the Figu Association cannot be involved in them. In any case, the whole thing must also always be structured in such a way that it is only an advertisement, in which the interested parties acquire any material of their own free will. Under no circumstances may commercial goods and animated films be used as missionary material and thus not be misused in this way. The same applies to spiritual teaching materials translated into other languages by persons outside the core group, for which the persons concerned are responsible in every respect. The same rule must therefore apply to commercial goods in the sense mentioned above, also in the sense that a contract is necessary and that the Figu Association cannot be held responsible in any way. A responsibility is therefore exclusively given to those persons who act on their own initiative in the mentioned manner, undertake something and distribute merchandise, whereby, however, corresponding contracts or other permission must be given. If persons act without a contract or other permission in relation to fee-goo materials, no matter what kind and with what things, including translations of spiritual teaching materials, then the Fee-Goo Association does not bear any responsibility for this, and also does not have to take action against it. Such activities, especially with legal proceedings, are not recommended because they consume vast amounts of financial resources, which the Fee-Goo Association cannot afford. Furthermore, it must be said that if the association Fee-Goo of the parent center or other Fee-Goo groups produce and distribute merchandise or animated films within the above-mentioned framework, then everything falls under the same legislation and conditions as those mentioned above.
That also applies, I suppose, to study groups and national groups. So they can improve their finances in order to promote missionary work, such as the production of writings, the holding of information stands and lectures, etc. For lectures of any kind, an entrance fee can also be charged, as we in the core group also do. This at least covers expenses.
That is included in the sense of my explanation.
Good. Then look here. This is a letter written by Bernadette. Please read it and see if everything is also in your mind.
What is written here is in accordance with what is important to say, but I think that there should be 2 or 3 small corrections.
Of course, I know why I have already talked to Bernadette about it. But if you want, I still have the letter on my computer. I can switch it on and put it in the letter, which you have to correct.
Yes.
Now then, the machine is already working, so you can dictate. When everything is clear, I will simply insert the corrected letter.
Dear Passive and Study members, 3 years ago, in May 2007, we had the pleasure of welcoming a new study group, namely the Bavarian Study Group in Munich, Germany, from which we also took leave again, because it had developed into a national group. The Bavarian Study Group occupies a special place in the history of the Fee-Goo in that it has been extremely successful and efficient as a study group, which is why it has already been able to establish itself as a national group after only a little more than 3 years. This success story is not necessarily unique, because a study group has the chance to work its way up to the national group in a short time, which is also responsible for the interests of all other study groups in the respective country. There can be several study groups per country, but only one national group. The only decisive factor is the expansion efforts of the study group itself. We cannot emphasize enough the importance of the establishment and growth of study groups and ultimately their establishment as national groups. National groups are the precursors of new core groups, which will be established in all countries around the world over time, and which will begin and gradually deepen and expand their missionary work in the context of spreading the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life, the teaching of the truth. From many passive members we know from personal conversations, letters, mails and telephone calls that they feel alone with their knowledge of the teaching of the Spirit and that they would very much like to exchange ideas with other like-minded people and to continue learning together with them and to participate in spreading the mission. We can only recommend to them to try to found study groups. If you are not active on your own, nothing will happen. You will remain alone with your knowledge and your longing for like-minded people, and in this way you will finally take what little you have learned to your grave. We can only recommend it to you year after year. Join together and form study and country groups where you will study and work together. In this way you will not only progress faster and easier by yourself, but you can also help to spread the urgently needed knowledge of the creative truth in the world, for example by organizing missionless information, booths or lectures, and by making an effort to pass on your knowledge, which is what many human beings are just waiting for. You only have to consider one single point, namely that you are not missionizing. We know and understand that for some of you, this is sometimes not so easy if you try to interest human beings in your concern and the teaching of the Spirit. Nevertheless, just when you are full of urge and desire to spread the truth, you should hold back in such a way that you do not approach human beings unsolicited and do not confront them with knowledge they are not yet ready for. Even if someone shows interest and keeps asking, also be reticent in what you say and never exert pressure or coercion in any way. Especially study and national groups outside the German-speaking world take on a particularly important task, namely that of spreading the German language, which is absolutely essential for the teaching and understanding of the spiritual teachings. The comprehensive and correct mastery of the German language alone opens up to students of the humanities its meaning and content in a comprehensive form. This means that often German speakers also need to learn and deepen their own mother tongue better in order to be able to access the broad and deep meaning of the spiritual teachings. As a rule, the true truth cannot be expressed in lapidary words and concepts. As we ourselves know from many years of grueling and painful experience, it is absolutely impossible to translate the value and content of the spiritual teachings into other languages. In no other language of the world, no matter how flowery, poetic, and elegant it may be in sound, is it possible to express the spiritual honor so aptly, precisely, and to the point as in German. In every other language, there is a lack of essential terms for which there are neither direct synonyms nor suitable paraphrases, which is why the understanding of the corresponding values in these languages is also sometimes completely missing. An example of this is the term violence. In English, there is only the word violence, which does not mean what is meant by Gewalt in German. In German, there is also the word Violenz, which comes from the Latin violentia, and whose meaning is Heftigkeit, that is to say, verstärkte Kraft. The term violence, however, leads back directly to the old Lyranian term Gewille and means much more than vehemence, namely to use all available compelling means to use physical, psychological, mental and conscious powers, abilities and skills to carry out and perform enormous deeds and actions. If one wanted to translate this extensive term into the English language and use it wherever the term violence is used, then the translations would not only be completely illegible, but also absolutely incomprehensible, because neither in English nor in the American language corresponding terms exist, and the understanding of them is also not given. This small example illustrates the difficulties and problems we and our translators are confronted with. With every translation into every language, questions about the exact meaning of German terms and words arise again and again, which are indispensable for the spiritual teaching and which can only be explained with elaborate paraphrases and explanations. Therefore, it is absolutely essential and compelling to learn the German language, no matter how difficult it may seem, correctly and well if one wants to deal fruitfully and successfully with the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the life, and profit from it. To state it once again emphatically, study and national groups in foreign language countries not only fulfill an extremely important task with translation work, but they also do a great deal to promote and spread the German language in every respect, so that the teaching of the Spirit can find its way into the consciousness and thinking of human beings and bear fruit there.
The matter is clear. Thank you, Ptah. Bernadette and I were also of the same opinion about what you corrected.
The corrections are important.
We also thought so. But tell me, have you followed what is happening with Catholic priests, etc., regarding sexual abuse of minors?
Of course. And you know as well as we do that these sexual abuses on children and juveniles have been practiced since time immemorial by Catholic priests and brothers and sisters of various Catholic orders. However, it is not only priests, pastors, religious brothers and sisters, but also heads and servants of various Catholic and private, as well as state institutions and homes.
And everything that has come to light and thus become known about it so far, in my opinion, it is only a small part of everything. The sad reality looks much worse. What has been known so far is only a few individual cases. This is also true of the male offenders, as well as of the female offenders, although fewer of them are known to have sexually assaulted children and juveniles. But this does not mean that sexual assaults are less serious in female Catholic orders, as well as in Catholic and private, as well as state institutions and homes, because sexual abuse of minors occurs everywhere in Catholic orders, as well as in institutions and homes. Sexual abuse of minors, or of any other kind of persons subject to duty and protection, always remains a very bad thing, regardless of whether it is practiced by Catholic priests, pastors, religious brothers, religious women, institutional or home directors, or their employees. Equally bad is everything when such things happen in private or state institutions and homes, as well as with pedagogues, or when parents, friends, acquaintances, and other offenders sexually assault minors and those under their care. The psychological and conscious damage alone, which is caused to the abused, usually destroys their whole life. Many suffer not only from severe feelings of guilt as a result of such abuses per se, but also suffer from a disturbed relationship with the opposite sex or with human beings in general. All persons of both the male and female sex who in any way sexually assault minors, that is, children and adolescents, or even older men and women subject to duty and protection, should be severely punished, which must also be the case with rape in relation to adults. The lax laws that exist in today's humane world, however, are so wrong that rapists, pedophiles, and other offenders who sexually abuse children and juveniles or even force them into prostitution and possibly even murder them are treated with kid gloves. The blame for this lies with the false humanists, judges and psychiatrists who, as those responsible, ensure that the degenerates get away with mild punitive measures and are then released again after a short time for new victims once they have served their sentence. The false humanists live under the delusion that offenders can be corrected by mild measures and punishments and senseless and useless therapies, even though the opposite is proven again and again. If harsh punitive measures and therapies are imposed, then these must be aimed at dissuading the fallible, delinquents, wrongdoers from their fallibilities and effectively healing them. Soft and false humanistic punitive measures are in any case completely useless, so that the offenders must be treated by hard but correct and humane punitive measures and by professional healing courses. And therapeutic measures must be such that they are truly successful, and that the evil and misconduct of the people being treated is actually remedied and cured. But this requires years of treatment processes, because only 2, 3, or 5 years are not enough. Because such healing therapies have to be calculated with much longer periods of time if they are really to bring success, after which the fallible ones can be set free again, but also only under appropriate supervision. This alone also makes it possible that, after their release from punishment and therapy, human beings who have been convicted of criminal offenses should not be released through false psychiatric reports and become criminals again in the same matters. It is therefore also urgently necessary that the psychiatric evaluation staff be examined extremely carefully to see whether they are really neutral and competent enough to carry out the appropriate therapy, and also to issue authoritative certificates in relation to a cure that has taken place, and in relation to the fact that the offenders can be released from prison. False humanism also occurs when murders are committed, because the longer the more, the less a human life is valued, and consequently murders are punished with only a few more years in prison or penitentiary. For a long time now, severe punitive measures have become extremely rare, so that offenders can wallow wonderfully in a prison or penitentiary, only to be released again after a short time and let loose on their victims.
Everything you say corresponds to reality. And the cases of sexual abuse that have come to light is really only the tip of an iceberg, as you say. Many abused, male and female, children as well as adolescents and foster parents are afraid to talk about it and to name the abusers openly, even if they have grown up long ago, because they are deeply intimidated. Others remain silent out of shame or because they are paid for their silence by the wrongdoers.
It is not debatable, but the whole thing is an abysmal mess, as is the fact that the Catholic Church claims the right to stand outside the laws of society, and the state to settle with the wrongdoers in its internal circles. And this settling is only to transfer the wrongdoers to their posts. This rule consists only in transferring the wrongdoers to their offices, not to the social and state jurisdiction and punishment, but only from their crime scene to a new crime scene, where they can continue their misdeeds undisturbed. Only very rarely do Catholic priests, clergymen, and pastors, as well as religious brothers and sisters, come to be called to account by the legal and state laws. As a rule, the guilty are protected by the Catholic Church, in contrast to Protestant, respectively evangelical clergymen, who are brought to justice, as is also the case with pedagogues, superiors, leaders, servants, as well as with pedophiles, etc., who are not subject to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church and its bishops, cardinals, as well as the Pope and the whole clergy in general, have such power that they can undermine the state and social laws and jurisdiction and bend them to their advantage. This alone is a reason that church and religions as well as state should be separated and must become separated.
It corresponds to an unprecedented shamefulness that a religious delusional institution, as you once correctly called the Catholic Church and the religions, is granted the right to reprimand its fallible ones, its wrongdoers, malefactors, and degenerates of any kind in its own direction, without being held accountable and severely punished by the social and state courts. But this is the case since time immemorial. This was also the case when the Catholic Church committed its murderous crimes with the help of the Inquisition, with the participation of social, state, and sovereign laws. Since time immemorial, the Catholic Church has been more powerful than the state, which also applies to the other religions, and no one dares to take power away from them and to subject the church dignitaries and all, those otherwise associated with the religious delusion institution, to the laws of society and the state.
As long as state and church or state and every religion are not separated from each other and power is not taken away from the church and religions in general, the church and the other religions will disregard and undermine the state and social laws and orders, trample them underfoot, abuse them, and also financially exploit their believers in order to also highly reward their sexual abusers in their circles.
Unfortunately, the Earth humans are so caught up in their religious delusion that they cannot use their intellect and reason in this respect, and have no chance whatsoever to recognize the truth. Consequently, it is also not possible for them to use their thoughts and feelings in a correct, rational way, and then act in a correct way.
How right you are. But tell me, do you know that Kal Korff is again maliciously working around on the internet with complete nonsense, also threatening Michael Horn with litigation? He also lies about the fact that an Islamist group and a Jewish organization are planning to take action against me.
Yes, that is known to me. All his machinations against you and Michael Horn, as well as the allegations concerning an Islamist and Jewish organization, correspond to a pathological stupidity that can be called ridiculous, as well as to an unparalleled ridiculousness. Kal Korff is sick with hatred against you, whereby he now extends this hatred to Michael Horn as well, because he is not deterred by the intrigues and untruths that Korff carries out and spreads. Korff suffers from a profound delusion that he would have to destroy you and your mission because he cannot come to terms with the truth. He also suffers from delusions of grandeur and a pathological egoism, which is why he also gets arbitrary and autocratic titles with which he signs his nonsensical publications on the internet. Among other things, this is also a sign of his megalomania.
I kind of feel sorry for the guy. He is really sick with hate eating away at him, and besides what you said, I cannot exactly consider him sane. Just the fact that he calls himself Colonel Kal Korff and Kaidan Unit Commander, as he calls himself in an email to Michael Horn, shows clearly that he is not in his right mind anymore. He is really to be pitied. How hatred must rage in this human being against Michael Horn and me, and against the Plejaren and the mission. I would not like to be in his shoes.
It is indeed, as you say, the man is truly to be pitied. And as it seems, his hatred towards you and Michael Horn is becoming more and more abysmal, so that he cannot free himself from it.
Maybe a good psychiatrist could help him.
Maybe. But as I judge his condition, it is questionable, which he would need a very, very long therapy, which he would not endure. But now, dear friend Edouard, I have some things to tell you that are for your ears only. I would also like to talk to you about something private, which my two daughters Simya-Se and Playa have asked me to do. It is about advice they ask you for.
Of course I'm all ears.
Then I want to start by saying that we have discussed the following things in our circle, for which we would like to hear your opinion, whether we should try to do it or not, and whether it would be good at all if we did it.